appreciate you introducing my daughter. I was trying to come up with something to embarrass her with, but it wasn't. When she came to ASU, it was a little bit of a surprise. I warned her mother at the time that she was always going to go to the East Coast or something like that, or Chicago. I said, we were coming down in April. I said, we're going to ASU in April. It's very dangerous when you're from Nebraska. It was 75 degrees, we're sitting outside having dinner, and she pretty much has never come home since. But, and I didn't think of her as a sports fan, but we went to the Arizona State game, and not only was she totally into it, there was some heckling going on from a fan from the University of Arizona, and they almost got thrown out. But after the game, she ran into the guy who almost got thrown out a couple rows behind us, and she's chanting ASU, ASU, right behind him in his ear, and it started the whole crowd doing it. and I was thinking, I think she likes it. One little thing, she mentioned that I coached my son in football, but he's 13 now, but when he was 8, I was one of the other coaches I was helping. I was just the assistant at the time. And one of the coaches says, we're gonna do a dive right. And everybody lines up. And I said, wait a second. Hey, you guys, raise your right hand. And it was just like, And so that was my first insight into coaching. Only half of them knew right from left. Anyway, I'm excited to do this. I usually will say yes to something, to ASU to come down and visit, because I'm associated with the law school, and I have been for a long time. They've been great to me. And they used to let me teach in January down here for a week, and now they come to Winnebago. I call it Spring Break Winnebago, which if you know anything about rural Nebraska, there's no beach. And so I've been affiliated for a long time, and now that my daughter's here, I was anxious to come down and do it. And I was just gonna do that little panel yesterday, and there was an opening, and I said, I've been working on something for months, and I didn't, just as a favor to somebody, I've been working on an expert witness issue, and it's ruined my nights and weekends for a few months. And I said, I have this idea I want to talk about, and because I looked at the agenda, and a lot of the issues were related to the lending, and through my law firm, I've had a lot of interaction with that, but Ho-Chunk Inc. itself has never been involved in it. It can be controversial, and since we're involved in every other controversy at Ho-Chunk Inc., I decided that we would not participate in that one. But as I worked through it, I found some things that I thought were worth sharing, and that's what this is about today. Okay. So it's called the evolution of tribal business and the internet. And I added this little title though, because I want you to keep it in mind as I present this. It's who's renting who, right? Because right now they're calling it Rent a Tribe, and I think of that as paternalistic. I think of it as self-serving, so they can take our money, that they can hurt us. And it also paints us in the worst possible light as dupes. And so I thought I would go through this with you. The way I'm going to go through it, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background and self-determination. I want to talk about a development pattern that has emerged. I want to get into the attacks a little bit and give some little responses to it. And I have this slide that I love called What Did You Expect? And really it comes down to were we supposed to be stupid? This is forever for your benefit. And then I want to get into what's next. So you got to go back a little bit and put this in context. I always say the government was tired of giving us money. They told us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and go out there and do things. That started in the 70s, late 60s, maybe early 70s. And the problem was the entire system was tilted against us. Somebody else controlled the legal system, somebody else controlled the academic system. All of our land and assets were held by the government in trust. And you know how that worked out, right, with the Cobell situation. And so we're supposed to somehow emerge from generations of poverty and go out in the business world and start kicking butt. And that doesn't work that way. And so it's taken a very long time to do that. But the idea of controlling our own destiny starts to take hold though, right? Where instead of, I think sometimes when I meet people, they point the finger at the government. And I said, you can point all day, but all they hear is womp, womp, womp. It's like Charlie Brown, right? And so you've got to figure out how to take some control of your own destiny. So we started this process of creating our own laws. We started establishing courts. Then we started getting more sophisticated regulations. right as I came along, we really started doing more on the corporate side of the equation, and I realized somebody said 25 years ago, oh my goodness. I put on my Facebook the other day, we had some Chinese people come to visit us, and they're the largest hemp producers of something in China, or in the world really. By the way, he said, we don't want any THC. He goes, it's the death penalty in China. I said, well, it's a misdemeanor here, but they take it real serious there. And he asked me if I was a tribal elder. I was like, what? I think he realized he offended me. I just turned 50, but I didn't think a tribal elder. But anyway, the corporate era started with really some big success. There's been some great stories, there's been some problems, but basically we're moving forward. What changed things the most, if you have to look back on it, is gaming, IGRA. IGRA added money to the equation. We were getting smarter, but it gave us capital, and that changed the, I mean, look at the place we're sitting in. I mean, for goodness sakes, right? It's unbelievable. And we start taking those things for granted now because they're everywhere in our world. But that really accelerated everything. And so what's happening is tribes are just getting smarter. We're getting more lawyers, we're getting clever, we're learning things. It's a gradual sophistication that if you think back in your mind 10, 20, 30 years ago, you would not have imagined some of the stuff that's going on. What the federal government did is they understood, I think, at some level that we were going to have trouble doing this. And they set up a series of systems, and the basic notion is that we would partner with an outside company, non-Indians. We would rent them for a while. That would allow us to get access to capital and knowledge. So we were somehow supposed to emerge from generations of poverty. I calculated we were forced onto our reservation in 1864 is what we sort of showed up there. And we have 5 years left in the 7th generation since we've been there. And I just, 7th generation isn't really our thing, but I thought it was sort of a relevant statistic. So I went back 3 or 4 generations and what our people were doing, and we were just surviving. And you're not going to be a sophisticated corporate entity coming out of that sort of environment, and so it's a very tough standard. But we've been learning it as we've gone along, and this pattern has started to emerge, and the government's trying to help us get into a business, partner with somebody, take their knowledge, take their capital, and get going. And then once you get a knowledge base, you can start exercising complete self-termination over it. This was the policy. This was encouraged repeatedly, this pattern. So the first pattern, first one you can point to, I think that's pretty easy as an example, is gaming. IGRA started in 1998. The tribes were able to pass their laws and establish gaming. Everybody knows this. But do you remember? Did you know anything about casinos? Probably not. I mean, nobody did. Did you know how to get the financing? I mean, it's still hard to get financing sometimes in Indian country, but you sure couldn't do it then. So we had a big problem with gaming experience and capital. And so the government understood this, and they allowed us to enter into management contracts. And in those management contracts, we turned over huge elements from financing, accounting, marketing, and hiring. Everything was turned over to our non-Indian partners. And that was the government's idea. It was a standard sort of problem. But in gaming, you can figure it out quick. Or maybe you just hire the guy they hired, and we didn't keep the management companies around for long. The ones that are still here are doing it at 2% or 5%, not 30 or 40%. My first job as a lawyer was to kick out the 40%ers on our tribe, right? And that actually resulted in the money that started Ho Chang Inc., to be honest. And so I didn't know that at the time I was going to work there, but I was creating my own job. So we got smart. We evolved. Within 5 to 7 years, tribes were running all of their own show again. Everything. And we used our own money. We didn't need anybody more. We took complete control. That was one of the first patterns. If you look at government contracting, and I run a government contracting company largely. That's one of our biggest businesses. It started in the 1980s, the Tribal 88, which is a prime contracting program. You have to remember, before that, if you could go visit reservations around the upper Midwest in my neighborhood, and they would sort of check the box with the Indians, and the Indians would get a contract, and they were the low-level labor subcontractor. They would be putting something together. And prime contracting meant we were in charge, but the problem is, you have the same problem. How do we go from low-level labor to being in charge? We needed partnerships, we needed capital, we needed bonding. And in government contracting, the federal government said you can do a joint venture, you can do team agreements, you can enter into mentor-protege agreements. In those agreements, guess what? We turned over elements of management, capital, bonding, finance, HR, just like in gaming, but we didn't need them for very long. Once you learn the business, you don't have to stick around. When you're partnering with somebody, they're taking half the money. So tribes had every incentive to get smart and evolve. And in our government contracting company, we had partnerships in the beginning a lot, but then we had every financial incentive to do it ourselves, and that's what we did. We took over and we took control on a gradual basis, and now we run most of them ourselves. We still partner some, but we don't need to. We also got smarter in terms of how we set up our corporate structures, because government contracting, for most tribes, is you get into sophisticated holding company structures to do that. So we learned a little bit more. And so when you think about that in the context of then comes tribal lending, which was about 10 years ago, just like in gaming, we created our own regulatory system. Just like in government contracting, we created our corporate structures. Just like in gaming and contracting, we partnered with outside experts to bring their knowledge. And just like in gaming and contracting, we evolved and we're slowly taking more control of those operations. It's exactly the same thing, right? The only difference is there isn't NEGRA or there isn't the 8A, but it's something that we evolved on our own. So why is it controversial? I think the big reason is states hate it. We're just, the more I think about it, we're always going to have this fight. This fight has been in place forever because we're not really completely sovereign. We're surrounded by somebody who thinks that they're in charge. And so we're competing sovereigns in one jurisdiction. So it's always been a battle. And you know how those battles go? Even listen to these cases yesterday that people were talking about. We don't expect to win, right? It's hard to win because the system helps the other side of this tremendously. The legal system is established to exploit us, to take control of us. So we're never really going to win that, right? And the states have had developed a system where they control us. They can't tell us what to do. They can't dictate to us because you can't tell Indian anything to do. Somebody told me I had to do something, and I said, hey, I'm Winnebago, I don't have to do a damn thing, right? And that's why I almost lost my job, by the way. But you're either a ho-chunk or not, right? So we don't like to be told what to do. I mean, nobody does, but we sure don't. And so the state has evolved a pretty good system working with the courts where they basically control us. So here's a tribe, but when we enter the stream of commerce, the state says, oh, this guy who sells to you, they can't do that unless they pay our tax. Or this guy has to pay our regulation. Or we'll threaten this guy over here. And so the state doesn't have to control us. They can just control who we deal with. Now think about that. What's the internet do? It bypasses that entire system of control. And we can just leapfrog it. And especially when you're dealing with other tribes, you can bypass it because then you have sovereignty on each side, and you don't have weak links for them to attack. If you think about what's going on with these class actions, they're going after the non-Indian partner. They're the weak links in this thing. If you were to come to Ho-Chunk Inc., we are vertically integrated in every way because we don't leave weak links for people to attack for us because we're tired of some of this game being played to hurt us. And so when you think about the internet, it has upset the apple cart. And so the states have been trying to figure out ways to play that and control us. If you look back to the PACT Act, the tribes were basically selling tobacco through the mail, and they cut off the credit card companies. The states did. They couldn't shut down the tribes. This is before the PACT Act. And then they got the FedEx to quit shipping, right? They isolated one more time. But the tribes sold it through the mail. The tribes did the ACH systems. The banks would still do it. Or they just took a check, right? And then finally they got the post office to stop through the law. But that was all state-driven. That whole PACT Act was basically an attempt to get the federal government to implement state power and control over us again, right? And so when there is no, what some of the CFPB was doing is something similar, I think, even though it's not part of it. I have the Wayfair tax decision on here, which we talked about yesterday. Is probably more of the same. First I had it called the Mayfair, and I realized it was a typo and changed it this morning. And I almost changed it to Crowfair just for fun. I think I'm going to start calling it that though. Let me get into the attacks on tribal lending, because this is where it sort of gets. I saw this speech once, and it was Tom Wolfe, he's passed away, but he got to be sort of a crazy author, and almost creepy. But gave a speech and he said, indignation is the last bastion of the idiot. And when you have nothing, you should get indignant. You know, like, I'm offended. And I'm a little indignant, so I'm worried that I'm slipping into the, I might be slipping a little bit. But this stuff bothers me, and it should bother everybody. Because some of the attacks are so ridiculous and paternalistic, and I'll just go through them. Tribes are being taken advantage of by outsiders. And I was like, I have this story here shocking. I think I might have said it yesterday. You know, when I said to our senator, you know, when I read the Washington Post that Indians are being taken advantage of by white guys in government contracting and making a bunch of money, I said, I'm shocked, right? But what they were trying to do in that situation was punish the tribes. So even if they do think we're being taken advantage of, they're still trying to punish us. But it assumes that we don't know what we're doing, these kinds of things. And I think tribes, when they get into lending, they know exactly what's going on. We need expertise, we need capital. So who is using who becomes the question, right? We can create this economic environment to do this kind of thing, but we need specialized skills to do it, and it doesn't take long to get smarter. One of the other taxes are not located on the reservation. The reservations are poor rural communities. We're emerging from these generations of poverty. These are not, at least in my neighborhood, they are not hotbeds of internet savvy, financial skilled workers. I mean, it just doesn't happen. It's not going to emerge from that environment. It is unfair, unrealistic. And why are we being held to some weird standard that nobody else would be held to? In every other business, you go and hire the expertise you need. If you look in the casinos, I mean, in our tribal casino, our tribal employment numbers are not that high anymore compared to when we first started, because they evolved to do other things. But we still need people with specialized skills to do whatever we want. At Ho-Chunk-Ape, we have hundreds of non-Indian workers with specialized skills. Nobody thinks anything of it. Nobody says, well, you're not a tribal company worker because you have too many white people working for you. It's just the weirdest racial, I mean, how does this even happen? How do you even have these kind of conversations? It's only in Indian country, and it's only when it's rationale to take you. I've noticed that when race is used as a factor by the courts, that it's a rationale to hurt us. It is never a rationale to hate us, or to help us in any way. Maybe I meant hate. This last little point is we can do business wherever the hell we want, right? This is the kind of stuff that bothers me. Ho-Chunk-Ape is an international company. We have an office in Mexico City. We had an office in the Green Zone. We do business in Afghanistan. We have an office in Guam, right? People praise us for that. They don't say, well, you must not be a tribal company anymore. It doesn't work that way. It's just ridiculous. Let me try to go on a tangent. Let me stop. Let me do the next one. They said we're hiding behind sovereign immunity. Well, the state of Nebraska has not let Indian tribes do casinos because of the Seminole case. So for 25 years, the state has hid behind sovereign immunity and left us without the opportunity to do Class 3 gaming, right? That's just okay, that's normal. I mentioned a lawsuit that we had yesterday, filing against Nebraska. They tried to claim sovereign immunity in it against us. Pretty normal, no big deal, right? So states use sovereign immunity all the time, but somehow or other, if tribes use it for an advantage, it becomes something that is sinister or something that somehow hurts people. And I think it's an unfair standard. This is the one where I think that it's worth really diving into a little bit more. It's tribes use their civil regulatory powers to create an advantage. Well, so do the states, right? How many times have you read that some states, well, think of the Amazon thing. They went, not Amazon, but, yeah, it was Amazon, their headquarters, they located in New York and Washington, D.C. They had 20-some states begged them to come there, offering billions of dollars, right? Now, people debate whether that's valuable or not, but nobody debates whether it's legal or whether or not they're allowed to do it. But somehow or another, us creating a corporate incentivized system becomes subject to a factor and a test in Virginia? Give me a break, right? I mean, everybody's doing it. But it's different somehow if a tribe does it. For a government entity, we should be able to use it as a policy tool. And the financing part, I think this has always bugged me, but until I had to research this, I never really quite understood it other than just sort of complaining about it. There was a case involving a Nebraska bank back in the, I think it was the early 80s or late 70s. And it was about what rate applied. And I can't think of the whole thing off the top of my head, but the result was that South Dakota decided to take advantage of that ruling, and they got rid of their usury law. And, oh yeah, the case said that whatever the rate is in your state, you can export that rate to your customer regardless of where they live. So South Dakota got rid of their usury laws. If you look at your credit card statement, I almost guarantee you it's from Sioux Falls, right? And because that is now one of the largest industries in their state. The town of Sioux Falls was a blip on the radar, and now it's a thriving community of a few 100,000 people, primarily because they changed the law, and all these credit cards started locating there. Citibank has like 5,000 or 10,000 employees there. The state in the country with the most banking assets is South Dakota, $2.5 trillion in assets, because they created a financial incentive for them to do this. And while I was researching this, one of the examples came up was Prime Bank issued a credit card for 79.9% interest, and that's perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal because it's a non-Indian company in a non-Indian state doing exactly what some of the, not hold your name, but what the tribes are trying to do. It is ridiculous that we are held to this bizarre standard, these crazy tests, when South Dakota is held up as an absolute model of success for what they're doing, and it's driving a big chunk of their economy, and they're patted on the back for it. If you look at Delaware, they created a corporate haven. 25% of their budget comes from corporate fees. They stay up till, you can go there till midnight on a Friday and file your corporate documents. I mean, you might as well have a drive-through. There are more corporations in Delaware than people, right? And so, perfectly normal. Everybody likes it. It creates a nice system that everybody can benefit from. But if a tribe tries to recruit somebody, hey, that's a problem. If a tribe tries to pass some sort of advantage laws on these types of things, it's a problem. If we try to create a corporate haven, it's a problem. It's somehow unfair. And this all started when it was back in the tax cases, when, oh, you can't market a tax advantage. That's not fair. The neighboring tribe in Nebraska is the Santee Sioux tribe. And I like them. They're small, but they are tough. You cannot tell the Santee what to do, right? And they sell cigarettes on their reservation in a non-Indian town across the river from South Dakota. The taxes in South Dakota are $10 a carton higher. So they sell a ton of cigarettes to South Dakotans who come across the river and buy them with the Nebraska tax on it off the reservation. It's a big business for them. No problem. They can market a tax advantage as long as it's Nebraska's tax advantage. But Nebraska doesn't want them to sell them cheaper, the native cigarettes, on their own reservation because they can't market a tax advantage. And what they're really saying is that the Indians can't market a tax advantage, but the same Indians are more than welcome to market their tax advantage, right? It's just sort of, it makes me indignant, I think is the word I'm looking for. I'll give you a couple more. The tribes, one of the big issues, the tribes only get a fixed percentage. Like a lot of the loan documents, you get 1 or 2%. That's how a lot of this started. And they're saying that that was unfair. And I said, and I was involved in some of these things when they first started out. My first question was, how much money does that 1 or 2% of the gross add up to? And somebody says like 20, 30%. And I said, that's not bad, considering we need knowledge, we need capital, and we don't trust non-Indians, right? We don't trust the government. Sometimes we don't trust other Indians. But we sure don't trust our non-Indian business partners to not manipulate the bottom line. And why would we, right? And so tribes have serious trust issues with everybody. And when we get money, tribes, we try to make it a gross thing all the time. Energy royalties, you get a percentage. Tax revenues, you get a percentage. Even in gaming, when we did gaming management, it was percentage-based, right? And so we do a lot of things that make sense for us on a percentage basis. And so I don't think it's totally unusual that tribes would enter into something like that. And there's one more here. And they said a lot of the attacks on tribes in this business, in these lawsuits, and if you were really reading them, it would really annoy you, I think. And I can't wait to meet the lawyers. They said there's not enough Indians working there. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, how paternalistic that is, and really just discriminatory. Imagine if you went to a company and said, say that Intel's here. Intel had a policy that they were only going to hire white people from the suburbs, from Gilbert, right? That's the only way they would be a valid company, right? That would be discriminatory, right? That would be outrageous. But somehow or another, some lawyers, because they want to make some money off us, come up with some standard that says we can only hire Indians from our reservation. Like Ho-Chunk Inc. has 1,000 employees. We only have 700 working age people in our community, and not all of them want to work for us. And so how would we ever grow if that was our standard, if we were held to that ridiculous standard? But that's what somehow is being subjected to right now. It is impossible for us to have this, especially in a complex, internet-savvy, business, financial-led workplace. You know, I interviewed one guy, an Indian guy, for an accounting job, because they're hard to find, right? And I said to him, as long as you don't punch Annette Hamilton, she's our chief operating officer, as long as you don't punch her in this interview, you got the job, right? He goes, okay, I wasn't planning on getting anybody. And I said, okay, welcome to Ho-Chunk Inc., right? Because so it's hard to find these skill sets in our world. We've been pushed for so long that we're not sitting around with computer scientists, engineers. I see one over here, you know. But AC Goyle runs Indians.com. He works for us. But so we do have them, but they're not everywhere. They don't necessarily want to get into this business either. And so, of course, we can hire whoever the hell we please. I gotta be careful. I was about to say something. Here's my favorite slide. I sent it to people when I was done with it, because by the time I was doing this last Saturday, I think. By the time I was doing this slide, I was mad, right? And I said, what did you expect would happen, right? I once said to somebody, one of our tribal leaders here, Kenny Mallard, he tells this story, but I said, what do you want to sell them, blankets on the side of the road? Is that your idea for us, right? Does that make you feel better when you drive through the res and maybe you stop and throw us a few bucks for a blanket and you try to work us down on price? I'd rather own the businesses, right? I'd rather control everything. If you come to Sioux City, we own the largest office building in town. It says Ho-Chunk on top, right? And our little logo's flying over the city. A story I like to tell is when we first did that, a non-Indian lady at the Chamber of Commerce dinner sitting next to me, rent space from us, and she said, I don't think people are going to like an Indian word on the skyline. I mean, have she met me? I said, who wants an Indian word in Sioux City? And I was like, Iowa, you know, and it's on the border with South Dakota and Nebraska. I said, you can leave if you want. She goes, well, I pay rent. I said, no, we don't care, we'll be all right. I see her in the elevator now, she's a nice lady. But it's just, you know, you're just dealing with weird perceptions sometimes, you know. But Sioux City can't have an Indian word on the building. Anyway, so it's funny. So I think people have these notions of us, right? And I call it fireworks, and I just got that from, what's that movie with the guys, Snakes and Sparklers? I can't think of it, but Adam Beach is selling snakes and sparklers. Joe Dirt. Yeah. So usually this is just beadworks and blankets, but I added fireworks as a tribute to Joe Dirt. And that's what people sometimes think for us, right? You come to Winnebago, you see a sophisticated corporate operation. You come to our office in Omaha, DC. I mean, it's a functioning entity. If you think about tribal lending, you could have predicted something like this happening. I made a prediction yesterday that insurance was next, right? The minute you put us on the path, the government put us on the path, they said, we're not going to give you any more money. You've got to fend for yourselves. We're going to get smarter. It may have taken 30, 40 years, but of course it started happening, right? The Fed's supposed to take care of ourselves. The Fed's taught us how to partner with non-Indians to gain knowledge, just like in gaming, just like in government contracting. I have lots of other examples too, but they're just a little bit too detailed. The states taught us how to use laws to create economic advantages, recruitment, usury laws, corporate havens, property tax advantage, all these kind of things. They taught us how to do it. They taught us how to create these perfect corporate environments to attract business. They taught us how to use sovereign immunity the hard way to protect their own interest at the expense of ours, right? Were we supposed to just get beaten down and say, well, gee, I guess that, or could we say, yeah, that sucked, but hey, noted, right? That's what's happening. You know, in my short career of this 25-year span, we've gone from just getting started in gaming to running sophisticated internet businesses, you know, to doing international work all over the world, to creating places like this. That's one generation, right? And that's only one generation from the beginning of this self-determination era. And And so of course this stuff was going to happen. And along the way, we sent all of our young people to your schools is what I have here. It's our school though. And we taught them. I've got a couple hundred students who filtered through Winnebago, right? Through both in Arizona and here. And I'm handing out the Kool-Aid, trust me, right? And of course we're gonna get smarter, right? Of course we would use the internet to create a sophisticated, tribal, corporate, and regulatory environment for business purposes. Of course we were gonna do that, right? I wouldn't have necessarily known what the internet was when the self-determination era started, or even when I started working, right? My personal email, by the way, is hochunk@aol.com. And people make fun of me for still having AOL, but if you worked at Ho-Chunk Inc., and there are, between the two tribes, maybe 12,000 Ho-Chunks, you'd keep Ho-Chunk at AOL too, right? But that's how old school, I mean, the internet's still new, right? And I don't like change. For a guy who's a champion of change, I guess, but I don't really like change in my personal life. But all this is happening so fast and so impressively, I think that somebody should be doing a business study on this, or a case study of the evolution of tribes and how smart we're getting and what's coming down the path. So I wrote here what's next. I only have 2 slides left, maybe 3, because I got something I want to show you. But there's really three stages in general. We partner, we get smart, we kick them out, essentially, is what the deal is. And in tribal lending, I think that we were in the partnering stage, some people still are. But a lot of tribes have started buying out their partners already. They've started to get more sophisticated, partly because of pressure to do so, and partly because that's what they want. And so tribes are right in the middle of that sort of second stage. And I think the next thing when it comes to the lending side of the equation is total tribal control. Our non-Indian partners are vulnerable to these sort of attacks. So I think that that's going to even accelerate going forward. So it's hard to say how it's going to play out. I think that what you have to think about is in gaming, we suffered in gaming. Competition killed us 2 years after we started. We were down 80%. And you know nobody came to rescue us? Actually, the state of Iowa came and wanted money from us. I always tell the story where I pretended to cry in the negotiations. This hurts my feelings. Because we'd laid off 200 people and they suggested we come to Omaha, our Council Bluffs, which is near Omaha, and get jobs as porters. And I said, wiping your guys' table and cleaning up your floors is not what we have in mind for our future. But that was their opinion of what we should do. And we offered 0, and we settled on $25,000. And so it works out in those cases. In government contracting, I had to go testify so they wouldn't get rid of the whole program or gut it because our competitors didn't like it. When we were the subcontractor, we were the good little Indians, you know? They gave us a little job. We weren't in the meeting, right? But we were producing products, and they thought that was good enough, right? When we became the prime contractor, we became a competitor, somebody that they had now had to squash. So they were trying to change the industry when I was the chairman of the Native American Contractor Association. So we had to go and fight, but we survived it, right? And we're still here, and it's still a thriving industry. I think even in gaming before IGRA, you had to fight and survive it. We had a bingo hall that was shut down. You know what the judge said? If the Indians took that bingo hall over, within 2 weeks the windows would be broken out, the curtains would be flattened in the breeze, and birds would be nesting in the rafters. This is a federal judge in our area. By the way, that's Steve King's area too. He's our congressman, who is sort of shockingly popular there, right? And actually, if you meet him, he's not such a bad guy, but he's very controversial in our world. I'm saying that because we need his help, by the way. This is being recorded to get our land back. I wasn't supposed to say anything about Steve. And Steve King gave a speech that I was at, and I was hosting it, and he said that we need to get 80 million Americans off their butt and get a job. And I was supposed to be nice to him, not saying anything mean, and I got up and I said, I just wrote a column in the paper, all these Indian guys are going to get off their butts and get off the couch and go get a job. I said, I'm the Steve King of the Winnebago Reservation. And they actually like that. For those who don't know, Steve King's a very controversial figure as a congressman. Anyway, I have digressed. So, I'm just thinking, oh no. My lobbyists are cringing right now. Edit that. So, If you think about gaming, if you think about government contracting, you just have to survive it, right? I'm in this tobacco battle, and I put on my Facebook the other day, we want to win, and they said it's going to be hard to win, and I said, you don't understand, when we deal with the government, we just want to survive. That's how we define winning. And I think that the tribal lending industry is in that survival fight. And here's the thing, some people get hit, some people get hammered, some people fade out, but a lot of people stick around, right, and fight it through. And it evolves into something else that everybody can live with. Everything that I've done at Ho Chunk Inc. over the years has been controversial. If we can wait it a couple years, they get used to it, right? It'll catch on, right? Ho Chunk on the skyline of Sioux City, it's okay now. Everybody calls it the Ho Chunk Center. I was on they have this thing on this weather thing on the weather ball. High atop the Ho Chunk Center is the weather ball, right? It's on the news now. It's normal, right? You've got to figure out a way to normalize some of this stuff, and I think we're going down that path. I'm a little bit worried about these class action lawyers. They don't care, right? They don't care about tribal sovereignty. There's no measured approach. It's all about money to them. It's all about a game. They have every incentive to turn us into victims, to turn us into dupes, to turn us into dumb Indians who somehow are getting taken advantage of. And they have no incentive whatever to understand the nuances and why tribes would do these kinds of things to get money to help their communities. You know, these aren't wealthy tribes who are going in and lending. These are tribes who need something desperately to change the lives on their reservation, right? If you go to a reservation, there's nobody from the government there to help them, right? We are 100% on our own. We have figured that a long time ago. And this is something that tribes have decided to do. But these people that are coming in are all about trying to make money. How is it any different than the people that shot the buffalo, right? How is it any different than the people that tried to take our land? It's nothing. Now it's just lawyers now doing it in a very different way, but it's the exact same thing. They're trying to take what we have. Here's my last slide. Who's the bad guys in this story? This is a weird question, and I wanted to end on this. Is it the tribe's partners? I don't know, they're trying to make money. We're trying to make money. We've attracted them there. We want to do well. Is it the tribes who need the profits to impact their community? Are we the bad guy? Is it the states trying to assert control of the tribes? Yeah, maybe. Is it the federal government? Maybe in some instances, but mostly I think the federal government's into benign neglect with us, right? They'll come hammer you sometimes, but I call it benign neglect, and I think we can live with that. As long as we can fight the states all day long, as long as the feds don't bother us. We have it, that's how we push our own agenda. Is the new bad guy these lawyers? I think if you have a bad guy emerging, I think it's them, right? Because they have every incentive to try to manipulate this and play this game. Something happened.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
I really like, why do we need a bad guy? You know, can't we just, that's how I wanted to end. Wouldn't it be better if we could just open the business and do our thing, right? Without the attacks, without the indignation, without the exploitation, what if we could just do stuff, right? And nobody cared. Maybe we can get a Chamber of Commerce award or something like that. Anyway, that's the end of my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I might have a few minutes left. Questions? Elena, any questions? Okay, so that's my daughter. Yes.
So, can you go to the microphone, please?
Really?
I can repeat it.
Okay, repeat it.
A lot of litigation, good facts, bad decisions, like the case we talked about yesterday where the shielding the tribal treasury from recourse by a subsidiary. That's the whole purpose of corporate structure, and yet that means that that designates that sub as not a arm of the tribe. How do you think we approach those instances where there's good facts and bad decisions?
You asked an age-old question, right? The problem we have here is that it's lending, and it's perceived to be negative, right? It's okay if other people do it, but it's perceived to be negative. So anytime it's that thing, you have bad facts, you get bad results. And I think that's, the whole effort is to make bad facts, or to perceive, the whole effort to hurt us is to make it as negative as possible, and that includes the attacking I mean, all we can do is be perfect in our corporate structure, right? That's all we can do. I think that we're gonna face these challenges, and there's not much we can do about it, and heck, we might even lose some, right? And I don't know how to solve that, except to attack it more at its core. Right now, we did this thing yesterday where they talked about the 6 factors in that big picture case. If we're doing that, guys, we are losing, right? We're already losing, right? Our dinner's on the table and they're trying to take a bite. They only have to win once, right? Some California case does one thing and everything gets upset, right? We are always under attack. I don't know how you can fix it. What I was thinking yesterday, though, if they give you 6 factors, then we should do 6 different things, right? You have to think of this as a game, right? As a strategy game. When the state moved the incidence of tax upstream, we moved our tribal tax downstream again, back onto us, right? Because that's the game they played, so we played it to our advantage. So I think that when over the years we've adapted our corporate code to add in stuff in the preamble about what our purposes are, because there have been tests added. And so I think you have to think of it as instead of saying, oh no, we lost, I think you gotta get creative to address those directly, right? And just keep being perfect. But this is not a static game because they're attacking from every angle and corner, and so we have to protect that. It's a good question. He asked about I wouldn't say he asked about corporate structure. How we're gonna stand and fight it.
Hi, Lance.
Hi, Lucas.
Since we have, we look out at the legal history of the past 20 years with lending and other businesses, and lender attack by tribe or by states and by other actors out there, there seems to be some controversy attached to that in terms of businesses and tribes using sovereign ability, whether it's exemption from regulation or sovereign immunity. Would you support some proactive approach in terms of getting tribal leaders together, tribal business leaders, in terms of getting ethics and saying, listen, let's get in front of this curve because attorneys general, class action lawyers, they're all going to come after us no matter what. They're going to say these aren't real Indians. Well, we're in front of this and we have ethics and we're all trying to do this. I get that's telling people what they can't do, but that could be something that may lead to discussions down the road where attorneys general actually may want to listen to us and they don't close doors on us when we have to meet with them.
Well, I think it's good that we have somebody doing that. But it's not gonna work, just FYI. It won't work immediately. And so I think we have, there's a regulatory body out there, there's a sort of association, I think that pushes the issue. And I remember when it was first formed, I was thinking, I wonder how that's gonna do, right? But I've been involved in NACA for a long time, and these things tend to evolve, and they become the voice, and they become things that provide perspective. Because what we're dealing with are perspective problems. We're the poor Indians being taken advantage of in their mind who don't have the skill set. So we've got to establish ourselves as something more sophisticated. And I think that what those advocacy organizations are doing, what NCI is doing, what tribes are doing, is changing people's mind. And it's painful that we have to do that, but in my experience, it's a painful road, but we should continue to do it. It should have some success, but we need to also adapt our strategies too, and figure out ways to be successful long term. But it is part of the survival strategy, this advocacy educational thing. But what you can't do is stop. The minute you stop, there's no point in advocacy, because that's really what they want. And so the trick in this game, whether it's gaming, whether it's tobacco, whether it's government contracting or lending, is to stay in business while this is going on. Because maybe it'll solve itself, or maybe they'll just get bored with it and go pick on somebody else, right? That's why I said it's about surviving, right? And in our tobacco business right now, we're fighting to the death, but we stopped in some ways, and now we're in a survival battle. And we stopped because the feds squeezed us. And so we're still doing some elements of it, but it's enough to hurt us. And I think that's the ultimate goal, is for us just to go away. But our goal is to let them get tired of picking on us and let them go away.
I was just going to point out, when you testified before the Senate Small Business, I think it was either Senate Indian Affairs with Senator Johans, that was something I cited as a success. They wanted to, you pointed out, they wanted to harm tribes and area contractors, but when you went and testified, it said, let the regulations play out. That's something where the Senate said, you're right. we should let this play out.
And we survived it. That was 6, 7 years ago. We're still here.
Yeah, and there's another threat on the horizon, it's category management, today's program. So I still think that there's something that we just communicate and tell the states and tell non-Indians, non-tribal actors that what we're doing. They may look at us differently, but I'm a millennial and I have ideals, so that's kind of my weakness, not where that is.
I love your optimism still. I'm mad about stuff.
Not chasing it.
I plan on being a very crotchety old man.
Thanks.
One more question, I think we got time for.
Well, I guess I think, since I'm now officially a tribal elder, that also makes me a crotchety old man. But one of the things in terms of what you're talking about also presents an opportunity to reach out to groups that normally might not, you think of being pro-Indian. And that, but there are lots of people who are out there who are sick and tired of nanny state government regulation. There's lots of people who think that the government is too involved. And in some cases, Indian country can be, another version of the miner's canary saying, this is where we ought to make liberty more prosperous and have more liberty and get government less involved. And if you think about who are the people that, one of them just declared, that she's running for president. And, and I point out to people that the CFPB is the most hostile anti-tribal federal entity since we stopped shooting Indians when Indian Affairs was in the War Department. And so there are natural allies that we
I'm at the ATF at the moment, but okay, I'll go with that.
Yeah, well, okay. But and Chairwoman Trepa can tell you, well, I think she'll stack up with the government oppression from the CFPB probably. But anyway, the point is there are people who think that that's wrong that have probably never had an Indian thought in their life.
Yeah.
And we need to reach out to those natural philosophical allies and educate them. Because all intellectually honest Federalists should actually be Indian rights activists if they think about it. And so those are natural allies that because of people's political affiliations, they may say, well, I can't talk to them, they're not part of my party. And we need to get past that and realize that there are areas, you mentioned the controversial congressman from your district, but there are less controversial people who also don't like what the CFPB is doing to Indian country that we can reach out to, and it may involve reaching across to people with a different letter after our name than we're normally used to talking to.
Yep. I think Gavin's my favorite Republican, just if you can figure that out. And just the advocacy for why don't we all get along. Here's the thing, guys. We create the worst possible environment for economic success, legally, economically, everything, right? That's the hand that we've been dealt by the government. That same government now in the court system is holding us to the highest possible standards, right? It's ridiculous, right? And I sometimes think, why am I being pushed? Why are we being questioned? We take 1,000 people off welfare and give them hope, and this is what we get, right? But the alternative, by the way, guys, is abject poverty, is extreme overcrowding in housing, all the social problems and isms that come with that, right? And so we're just going to keep fighting, and we're going to survive, and we're going to push forward, and that's what everyone's going to do. You guys, I want to make one little announcement. I run Ho Chunk Inc., and I also am the managing partner of Frederick's People in Morgan, which I think is the largest native law firm in the country, but I won't be soon. I'm going to make some changes, and I'm going to start my own thing with a group of pretty badass Indian lawyers. We're going to do our own thing, and we were trying to figure out what to name it, and my grandfather's name was Harold Bigfire, and he was the toughest man I ever knew. Right? He had one arm and no toes. He cut his toes off by accident. He lost his arm in accident, but he ran a heavy equipment operator in the union. And one day, and he lived out on the road with them sometimes in a school bus. And I went to visit him one time, and someone said, "Hey, Chief." And I said, "Are you a chief?" Later, he goes, "No, I'm not a chief." He goes, "That's just what they call me here." And I said, and he goes, "But I get paid $17 an hour to drive this heavy equipment around." You know, he's got one arm, right? He goes, "The day of retirement, I punched that guy in the face." But he ran he was a professional boxer, right? But he took it every day, right? Because he could support his 7 kids that way. So every day he took it, right? And his name was Harold Bigfire. And this is going to be my company. Thank you very much.